Welcome back to another revision tutorial with Miss Sweet. Today we are doing an entire walkthrough of the poem Exposure by Wilfred Owen. Ultimately, Exposure portrays war as a force that strips soldiers of their humanity, draining their hope and connection to life. The poem emphasizes the futility of war and criticizes the glorified view of heroism, showing instead how the indifferent, punishing elements become yet another layer of the soldier's suffering. Here is some challenging vocab which features in the poem. Let's explore the meaning. Merciless means showing no kindness or being cruel. Wearied is when someone is very tired or lacking energy and enthusiasm. Salient means important. Sentries are soldiers who guard a place, usually by standing at its entrance. A gust is a sudden, strong wind that blows for a very short time. A gunnery is artillery or a weapon. Poignant is a feeling of sadness. Nonchalance is calm behavior that suggests you are not interested or do not care. Both poems explore the physical and psychological impact of war on soldiers. While Exposure focuses on the slow, agonizing wait in the trenches, Bayonet Charge captures a soldier's sudden, panicked rush across a battlefield. Bayonet Charge presents the dehumanizing effects of war and the overwhelming fear experienced by soldiers, similar to Exposure's portrayal of psychological torment and hopelessness. Hugh's poem also questions patriotism and the disillusionment of soldiers in combat. Like Exposure, Remains explores the lasting psychological impact of war on soldiers, especially the trauma that remains after physical battle. Remains delves into the emotional scars and guilt that haunt soldiers long after the conflict ends, which parallels the existential crisis and mental suffering present in Exposure. Both poems examine how the experience of war lingers within soldiers' minds. Both poems address the themes of war, suffering, and the emotional toll it takes on those who witness it. War Photographer focuses on the trauma and inner conflict of a war photographer who feels alienated upon returning home. Like the soldiers in Exposure, the photographer is deeply affected by the horrors of war, feeling a sense of helplessness and despair. The first line. The opening line personifies nature as an enemy, describing the merciless wind as kniving into the soldiers. This establishes the wind as a violent force, as harmful and relentless as the battlefield itself. The choice of knife suggests the sharp, penetrating cold that physically and mentally tortures the soldiers. The phrase "our brains ache" highlights the psychological suffering of the soldiers, showing that they are not only physically cold but mentally strained, haunted by both fear and fatigue. The east winds hint at a deep cultural symbol in the Bible, where east winds often signify misfortune and adversity, deepening the sense of hopelessness. Silence as a symbol. Silence is a powerful symbol in this stanza, conveying not peace, but rather an oppressive anticipation. In the absence of sound, the soldier's anxiety grows, as the silence becomes almost as threatening as the prospect of an enemy attack. Onomatopoeia and assonance, the words flickering and rumbles use soft, muted sounds to echo the distant, persistent noise of artillery fire. These sounds create an auditory image of the unending war in the background, implying that the conflict is continuous and pervasive. Simile. Comparing the sound of gunnery to a dull rumor suggests that the war feels both distant and strangely irrelevant to the soldiers, as though they are isolated from its true purpose or meaning. This line hints at the soldiers' growing detachment and disillusionment, as they can no longer connect their suffering with any tangible cause. Rhetorical question. This question embodies the soldiers' existential crisis, as they grapple with the purpose of their suffering. By questioning their presence, Owen suggests that the soldiers have lost faith in the rationale behind the war and are haunted by the seeming pointlessness of their actions. Juxtaposition. Dawn is traditionally associated with new beginnings and hope, but Owen pairs it with poignant misery, inverting its usual positive connotations. This choice reflects the soldier's bleak reality, where dawn brings not relief, but a continuation of suffering. Triadic structure: the list of 3, war lasts, rain soaks, and clouds sag, creates a cumulative effect, suggesting the monotony of the soldier's existence. These 3 statements depict an unchanging reality that the soldiers have come to accept. They only know that their misery persists, with no resolution in sight. Sibilance. The repetition of the S sound in sudden successive creates a hissing effect, mimicking the sound of bullets whizzing through the air. This auditory imagery enhances the urgency and violence of the scene. Oxymoron. The phrase "shudders black with snow" combines contrasting elements, suggesting a conflict between the cold, often seen as pure or white, and the darkness of despair. This contradiction reflects the complexity of the soldier's experiences, where even natural elements become ominous. Verbs and connotation. Words like cringe and stare suggest the soldier's helpless, defensive posture. Cringe implies fear and discomfort, while snow-dazed suggests a numbness or trance-like state, indicating their gradual loss of awareness or responsiveness. Alliteration. The repeated bee sounds in blossoms and blackbird create a gentle, soothing rhythm, evoking the calm of nature. This rhythm contrasts with the harshness of war and conveys the soldier's longing for peace and tranquility. Rhetorical question. This question captures the soldier's uncertainty about their own survival. They wonder whether their dreams and visions are a sign that they are slipping closer to death, as if their minds are preparing to let go of life. Metaphor and personification. Owen describes the soldiers as ghosts, emphasizing their frail, lifeless state and their separation from the world of the living. The word ghost suggests that they are already halfway into death, drifting between life and the afterlife. Symbolism and repetition. The doors and shutters being closed symbolize the soldiers' sense of exclusion from the lives they once knew. The repetition of closed intensifies the feeling of separation, as if they are barred from returning to their past. Repetition of dying theme. By referring directly to dying, Owen reminds the reader of the constant proximity of death. This blunt statement highlights the soldiers' acceptance of their grim reality and their sense of helplessness in the face of war's cruelty. Metaphor and personification of eyes are ice. By describing the soldier's eyes as ice, the dead soldier's eyes are literally frozen, reflecting the physical impact of the frost, and they are figuratively cold and lifeless, devoid of emotion or vitality. Irony and nihilism. The irony of nothing happens is that, in fact, Everything has happened, the soldiers are slowly dying, freezing, and being buried. The line captures the feeling of helplessness and detachment, as though each death and each day of suffering makes no difference in the larger scheme, emphasizing the nihilistic outlook imposed by war. Juxtaposition of nature and humanity. In coupling Mud and Us, Owen places the soldiers on the same level as the lifeless earth, suggesting that they are being reduced to an almost inanimate state, soon to become part of the ground itself. Metaphor of fragility. By describing their foreheads as crisp, Owen emphasizes the vulnerability and fragility of the human body against the cold. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have found this video useful.